All right. So we talked about the three eyes: eye of body, eye of mind, and eye of heart. And then we talked about the three operating systems. Uh, the childhood operating system was primarily bodily, how to sensate, and then the adult operating system, which brings in the left brain and logic, words, laws, time, space. And then the third operating system was the integral operating system, and that really is the system of the heart. It's seeing with your heart as a way, and the contemplative heart. Uh, Now I want to actually bring it right down to the moment. In a 5, 6, 7 minutes, we'll finish this third part. This is about the three forces, the three energetic forces that you meet every time that you attempt to do contemplation, attempt to just let go of words and motion and go into silence and stillness. Okay, and and then we'll realize. I think anybody who's tried this even once, and most of you have worked at this a while, you know what an illusion it is to achieve peace of mind, because there is no there is no peace found in the mind. Peace is found in the heart. So I want you to imagine something now. I want you to imagine a teeter totter, like at your old childhood playground, where you could sit on one end and your pal could sit on the other, and you go back and forth. And then there was a fulcrum right in the middle of that, if you could go up or down based on it. So imagine that kind of teeter totter uh, in your own mind, in your own experience, as you attempt to do this thing called contemplation, which is to become uh, at least outwardly silent, outwardly still. Okay. Uh, and you know how unstill it is in the mind, and how unsilent it is in the mind. So let's imagine at one end of the teeter totter, the ego, which is prominent in those first two operating systems. It gets refined a little bit. It can be a little bit under, in the service of other things. If you're initiated properly into adulthood, and if you actually really do assimilate the functional parts of the adult operating system, your ego is not like rampant and just making all the decisions. Remember, the ego is interested in thoughts. It works in the thinking mind, but the ego mainly is a contractive force. It makes things small so they can manage, because the ego's main driving energy is fear and survival. So if you can make it smaller, we can control it, and then I can survive this. So at one end of the teeter totter, you have the ego, which is a contractive force, and a force fueled by fear, which is it's sometimes helpful. But basically, you got this at one end of the teeter totter, and at the other end, you have the soul. We haven't talked about the soul yet, but it's a non-material thing. And the soul is not interested in thought, it's interested in experience. So there's this part of your consciousness that the ego part's interested in by thinking, controlling, managing, shrinking, thinking and shrinking, really, for the ego. But the soul is the opposite. It's interested in experience and expansion. Uh, okay, and where the ego is running on the energy of fear, the soul is running on the energy of love, you see. And where the ego's goal at one end of the teeter totter is survival of this, organism, the soul's interested in the evolution. Okay. And so you got these two things that are always, I like to say in my mind when I sit, rarely quiet. There's usually a couple of, it's like a battle of the bands. It's sort of like there's two choruses. Sometimes my mind feels like a Mormon tabernacle choir There's all these voices, and they're competing forces. And but those are really the two camps. As you do this work over time, you can discern the voices. It's called the discernment of voices, or the discernment of spirits in Christian contemplative tradition. And you recognize now the voice of fear, the voice of getting smaller, the voice of management, et cetera. And then you realize there's also these voices that are fueled by love, not fear, and they're about expanding your view of yourself, expanding your view of the universe, expanding the view of, you know, God itself, if that turns meaningful to you. And it's about evolution, going towards something bigger. So these two forces are on this teeter totter, and you know, the ego sometimes, weighs more, soul weighs more. Now the center point, the fulcrum of this thing, is where the heart is. That's why I say in contemplative meditation, both Christian contemplation and Tibetan, the heart is the thing that can balance these two. Imagine the teeter totter totally balanced, where you have the ego and all its concerns about your body and survival, and then you got the soul that is concerned of, has this force of love that just wants to expand the whole program of your life. And imagine that they're perfectly balanced on this fulcrum of the heart. That's really so, ego's thought, soul's experience. The heart is awareness. The heart is just aware of what's going on. That's why in some Buddhist traditions they call it the witness. It's not taking sides. It's not saying ego bad, soul good, or anything. It's just witnessing. It holds all of it, you see. It doesn't try to get rid of anything in the mind. And it doesn't try to necessarily go towards anything that the soul's proposing. It's holding it in awareness. That's why I'll call it the mirror of the heart. As a Christian, the way of talking about, Buddhists talk about the witness, just the ability to witness it all. And that's where peace comes from. It doesn't come from the absence of conflict or the absence of different points of view. Peace comes to be able to be aware of both, hold all of it long enough to somehow to where it can integrate, you see. And that is that center that they talk about in centering prayer. That is the center that Merton was talking about when he talked about what was it like, what was even God like. He said, well, the center that's everywhere, whose circumference is nowhere. You see, so it's a perfect integration of that. It's not elsewhere. You see, the kingdom of heaven, as it was unfortunately called by the time it got into English, the center is in you, and it's also within us. Every one of us has this center, which is where the peace comes from. Because if it can hold it all, the concerns of the ego, they're not nothing. Because if you don't survive, you don't end up evolving and thriving and becoming who you can be. See, so you're not trying to get rid of anything. You're actually aware of it all when you sit. And this awareness is more like a mirror. It's not picking and choosing. It's not saying good or bad. It's not dualistic. You see, the heart sees the whole thing. So to be able, that's why I say when you drop into contemplation, the image I like a lot is just you're descending into the cave of the heart, into the mirror of the heart. You're at fulcrum point. And all of a sudden you'll be going one way or the other. That's fine. When you're aware of it, you sort of come back to the center, which is just awareness. It's just holding it all without picking or choosing. There's a kind of peace, even when there's so much, two different agendas working within you. Yeah. The heart can integrate them, can hold them all. And then something beautiful happens when the two are held together. Yeah. Yeah. So image for our second 40 minutes of sitting. And again, uh, the bell ring just to let you know when it's halftime there. But you're capable of sitting through the whole thing and just constantly coming back to that center. When the teeter totter's tipping in one direction or the other, too much thinking, or you get hooked on an experience and you're really running with it, bring yourself back to center, and the center is the heart. So maybe an image that'll help. All right, that's what I call the three forces: the ego, the soul, and the heart. We've got them all. That's the good news. Now you can practice using them. Okay.